This is your World War III breaking news update. At the time of making this video, it's about 1 hour since Tel Aviv was first struck with a barrage of Iranian hypersonic and ballistic missiles. It's expected that more are on their way. Israel has already pledged that they are going to retaliate by striking Iran's oil and gas infrastructure, which will likely lead to Iran responding in kind, possibly even targeting the Dimona nuclear facility and the surrounding similar facilities in the Gulf states. Now, we know that there have been attacks on 3 nuclear facilities inside of Iran. The International Atomic Energy Agency has said that there is a radiation leak at Natanz. In addition to that, the Fordow and what was the other one? Isfahan facilities were also struck. Now, a lot of those were above ground. A lot of this stuff is beneath the ground, buried 150 to 500 meters beneath rock. So they're impenetrable to conventional weapons. However, the scope and scale of the attacks and the depth of penetration and infiltration by clandestine special operations groups are taking its toll on not only the Iranian air defense and their military bases, but also on their ability to launch retaliatory strikes. So we know that a lot of the entranceways to the missile cities were destroyed. A lot of these came from the inside out. There's speculation that there is a cyber component to this, an electronic warfare component, and of course an on-the-ground asymmetrical sabotage component. All of this utilizing things like anti-tank missiles in order to take out these, and drones, of course, to take out the air defense systems. They also allege to have used containers with missiles in them, very similar to what we've seen in Ukraine. Now, on that point about Ukraine, there's a connection here that nobody is really talking about at this point in time. Okay, we're going to talk about exactly what's going to come next with Iran. I've been right about 3 things and I was wrong about 1. I was wrong about the time of the attack, I was right about the time of the attack. I was right about the nature of the attack. I said it was going to be a decapitation strike. And I also have been calling attention to this artificially contrived enmity between Trump and Netanyahu that they've been demonstrating for the past few weeks, which now, as we know, was part of the whole program. The Trump administration now admits to feigning division with Netanyahu in order to lull the Iranian leadership into a state of complacency, okay, so that they could get them to congregate in one place above ground and take them all out in one fell swoop. The entire upper echelon of the Iranian military has been completely eradicated. Can you believe that? That is a masterclass in espionage and clandestine operations. And if the Iranians don't respond with full force, it's already a fait accompli. The United States and Israel have to go for regime change at this point. They're going for the Ayatollah. They're going to systematically take out everybody until they have full control over all of the Iranian resources, unless the Russians and the Chinese can get in there and do something to interdict Iran's demise. Because at this point, it is not looking good. Unless Iran unloads wave after wave after wave of drones and missiles until they can close their ranks, get their airspace under control, then this thing could be over relatively quick, but not without a whole lot of pain and collateral damage throughout the Middle East in the process. Now, let's talk about the parallels between what just happened in Russia with Ukraine targeting Russia's nuclear bases with a very similar operation whereby they utilized drones that were hidden in shipping containers and flown remotely to their destinations, of course. And by remotely, I mean even outside of the country, in some instances leveraging, presumably, Starlink and other artificial intelligence mechanisms in order to get them on target. Well, the same thing has happened here. Okay, now, both of these operations were running in parallel. And the Ukrainian operation happened just a couple weeks before Israel burned its similar 0 day. And we know that if you're going to burn a 0 day like this, if you're going to go to such an extent that that Israel has, they're going all the way. Okay, there's no two ways about it. They're going all the way. Now, what does that mean, though? That means that there's high-level coordination between what's happening in Russia and what is happening in Iran. Now, this might seem obvious to some geostrategists who've been paying attention, but it's one of those connections that they're very quiet about, okay? Now, here's what the commander of Russia's Akhmat forces, Apti Aladanov, this is the guy who basically led the charge in purging the Ukrainians from Kursk, from the invasion of Russia. He purged NATO from Russia. This is a guy that is typically very measured in his statements, doesn't speak out of turn, is closely aligned with the talking points of the Kremlin. I have never seen such a shocked look on his face when he said the following, which is rather unorthodox compared to what is typical of a Russian general of this stature, okay? He urged Russian leadership to launch a mass mobilization, okay? Calling to draft up to 1 million people, claiming that the Third World War has begun, and concerned that they were going to fall to the same fate, distinctly referencing Iran. And he's shooting this video while driving a military truck in a hot zone, I presume. And so this is very serious. It's one thing for the Wagner chief to spout off like this. It's another for one of Putin's best generals, who essentially single-handedly was able to purge the Ukrainians from Kursk. You know, for him to say this is very significant. And what this means is that if the Russians cannot get their southern flank, which is the Caspian Sea, all the places where Iran borders Russia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, if they can't get that under control, then there is a risk that not only is it going to become incredibly destabilized, which will create a security issue and an attack vector for them in that part of the world, but it is also going to free up the West and embolden them to continue to pursue similar courses of action, decapitation strike courses of action in Russia. And I think now we can appreciate the paranoia of Vladimir Putin, can't we? When he sits in his bunker and communicates with people on screens, people call that paranoid, while clearly there's a reason why you don't lackadaisically congregate in one place above ground in a war zone just because the guys who did the exact same thing told you that they're going to wait till Sunday before they attack. Unbelievable incompetence. I really can't believe it. The U.S. is now moving their forces into position. Naval forces are currently moving into the region. The United States is about to get sucked into this war. It's going to happen. There's already, I think, 24 casualties in Tel Aviv. Those are casualties. Those aren't necessarily deaths. The Iranian foreign minister, who is typically quite dovish when he talks about war, he is now saying calls for restraint are unjustified. Obviously, they've declared war. This is a declaration of war. Now, we don't ever declare war nowadays, so I don't think we should expect any formal declaration, but this is a de facto state of war, and it is only going to intensify. We're going to quickly get past the point where it's tit for tat. So long as we're taking turns, I guess it's not a full war yet, but when, you know, that's a good way to know that it's a full-blown conflict, is then you stop taking stock of whose turn it is. When it ceases to be somebody's turn and it is just what it is, then it looks like we have more missiles coming inbound here as we speak. You know, it's this religious pageantry of the Iranians and that whole axis of resistance that is always their downfall. Like, who really cares about raising a red flag when your country is under total attack, you know, and doing all these symbolic, gestures and these religious, traditions that you have to do before you do a counterstrike? I mean, you're going up against cold, calculated gangsters who are decisive, they are cunning, and they are determined at any cost. And they ask for forgiveness later. That's the difference. The West plays to win. These guys don't play to win. They just play to basically, wait for approval. And you're going to lose if that's the case. So I suspect that there's a very good possibility that the Iranian regime is going to collapse in the coming days ahead. What we've seen in Syria, what we've seen in Lebanon, and the only places that are holding out, I'm starting to think that Yemen is in charge, because they're the only ones who were, well, before a couple hours ago anyways, were able to get a ballistic missile off the ground. At least the Yemenis, at least the Houthis, have good enough OPSEC that they're not as penetrated as the Israelis. And what does that say about Iran's just intelligence game? I mean, it's got to be incredibly weak if they are that deeply penetrated, when they had every opportunity to, especially after the pager attack. And I distinctly remember I asked Professor Morandi that on the channel. I said, are you sure that they have contingency plans in place? And are they expecting an asymmetrical decapitation strike like Hezbollah? You can go back and watch that video. And honestly, he kind of brushed it off and said, yeah, we're not really worried about that. We're a much bigger, more powerful country. But at the end of the day, guys, all it takes is one man. Okay, it takes one man who can see all the angles. And in Russia, that's Vladimir Putin. It really takes one guy to be able to win a massive war, because you can have all the weapons. You can have the biggest army. If you don't have the right person leading them, it's game over. Which is why they want to assassinate Putin so much, because we don't know what how he's gonna conduct himself in this type of situation. But Putin has the cunning. He seems to lack the determination to really push back, but I think now he's going to be put in a position that he's going to have no choice. The Russians are going to have to escalate to de-escalate. They're going to have to do something. The Chinese and the Russians are going to have to help the Iranians rebuild their air defense. But if this chain of command continues to be taken out systematically and they can't close their ranks, then it's game over. They're going to go in there, and I'm sure, because these guys think of everything, and we don't give the Western intelligence agencies enough credit for the 4D chess that they've been playing. We always talk about how they don't play the soft power game, and it's true, we don't. We don't care if the world likes us, we just care about winning. But they are good at seeing these different angles, and I'm sure they have just a series of thousands of targets. Already 300 targets have been struck. They have thousands of targets. They have a game plan for how they're going to do regime change. They already have the guy picked. It's the Shah's son, okay? And his son or his daughter, his successor. So that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to bring all that back. So I suspect that Russia or Iran, if they're really backed into a corner, we're going to see some cyber attacks, and I would not be surprised. In fact, I'm actually expecting a power outage or a major cyber attack on the banks, on internet, social media. Something big is about to go down. This could be a very, very insane weekend. So just keep your head on a swivel, and I will keep you apprised of what's going on. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.